and welcome to the Unholy Script. I've got this one memory that still chills me to the bone. Something that happened when I was really young. For years, I thought it was just a weird, messed up dream. It had that hazy, slow-motion feeling, like something half-remembered from a nightmare. But a few months ago, my mom brought it up out of nowhere. She said, "Do you remember that night when you were little?" And when I told her I thought I had dreamed it, she looked at me and said, "No, Ethan, that really happened." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some spooky dream I'd carried around. It was real. And honestly, I wish it wasn't. I remember waking up in the middle of the night. Everything felt heavy and dead still. The air, the silence, even the shadows. You know that strange feeling when you just know you're alone, even when there's no reason to know it. That's exactly how it felt. I was maybe 4 years old, and something about that silence felt wrong, like the house itself was holding its breath. I got out of bed and wandered into my parents' room. I was too short to reach the light switches, so I relied on the soft glow of moonlight coming through the window. Their bed was empty. The sheets were tossed aside. Confused, I went downstairs, expecting to find them in the living room. The TV was on, but there was no show. No sound, just static filling the screen. White noise hissing softly in the dark. I didn't understand why it was on or what time it could possibly be. I just stood there for a while, staring at the snowstorm of light on the screen. The whole room was tinted red, as if the light outside was flickering through the windows. I made my way toward the kitchen, still calling softly for my mom and dad. That's when I saw her dot at first. I didn't notice anyone sitting at the kitchen table. She was almost swallowed by the darkness. But then, a soft voice spoke from the shadows, an old woman's voice, and I froze. I tried to reach the light switch, climbing up on the stool we kept by the counter. But the woman said, "Don't turn on the light." "Dear." Her voice was calm, but something about it made my skin crawl. So I didn't dot in the faint silver glow from the window. I could barely make out her figure. She was sitting very still at the table, her head tilted slightly toward me. And the strangest thing, the detail that still makes me shiver even now, is that she wasn't wearing any clothes. Completely, utterly naked. Why that didn't terrify me as a kid, I'll never understand. Maybe I was too young to grasp how wrong that was. I just remember standing there, wide-eyed, as she smiled faintly and said she was our neighbor. She told me that my mom and dad had gone out for a while, but they'd sent her over to keep me company. She said not to worry, that she'd be here for me. "Always here," she whispered. Before I could even process what she meant, the front door creaked open. I heard the rattle of keys, and then my parents' voices calling out. I ran down the hallway and into their arms, relief flooding through me. My mom scooped me up, apologizing for leaving me alone. She said they just stepped out for a few minutes. I told them it was okay. The neighbor lady had been watching me. I even told them. She said she'd always be here. When my parents asked where she was, I pointed toward the kitchen. My dad walked in first, flipped on the light, and the chair she'd been sitting on was knocked over. The back door stood wide open, letting in the cold night air. When my mom brought it up years later, she told me details I didn't even remember. Apparently, she and my dad had gone outside because there was a house fire a few doors down. The red flashing lights that tinted my memory weren't a dream. They were from the fire trucks and ambulances outside. That explained the eerie glow I remembered. But there was more. Mom said that when they came back, I told them the neighbor lady wasn't there to take care of me. She was trying to take me with her. I told them she was slimy and that I didn't like her. Mom said I kept repeating that word, slimy, but I couldn't explain what I meant. When they went into the kitchen, they found a glass jar sitting on the table, smeared with some kind of clear, sticky substance. They had no idea what it was. That detail still creeps her out. According to her, they were gone for no more than 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. But she swears that when they came back, the back door was open, like someone had just left in a hurry. For years, my parents wondered if the fire and the woman were somehow connected. Maybe whatever was on her skin was some kind of chemical or accelerant. I've thought about it a lot since then. Maybe she wasn't even real. Maybe she was something else entirely. Something that didn't belong in that house or that night. It's comforting in a way to know I didn't dream it all up. But at the same time, knowing it actually happened makes it worse. Even now, all these years later, whenever I'm home alone and the house gets too quiet, I still half expect to hear that voice whisper from the dark again, "Don't turn on the light." I've got a story for you that's become a bit of a family legend over the years. One of those tales that's both terrifying and strangely cherished at the same time. It's one of those memories that scares you even as you smile remembering it. Back in the days when this happened, my dad was a park ranger stationed out in a remote stretch of forest land near Redwood Valley, a few miles from the Oregon border. He and my mom had separated not long after I was born, and our relationship had always been complicated. I'm not saying my dad wasn't there for me. He just wasn't the kind of man who knew how to stay still. Settling down and having a family was never really in his nature. He was restless, built for the wilderness, not for small talk and suburban life. When he did try, though, he gave it everything he had. But he wasn't always around, and sometimes I'd go months without hearing from him. As I got older, I stopped taking it personally. Dad was what everyone called a wanderer, someone who needed open skies and tall trees to breathe. Being a park ranger was more than a job to him. It was his lifeline. As a kid, I used to get angry at him for missing birthdays or holidays. Every other kid had a dad who showed up on weekends. Mine lived in a cabin surrounded by bears. But as I grew up, especially after he passed away, I began to understand him. I realized that his way of loving me was different, quieter, but no less real. Most of my best memories of him come from when I was older. But this one, happened when I was still a kid. And strangely enough, it's a story where he wasn't even there. After I turned 10, Dad finally managed to get a semi-permanent ranger post at Redwood Valley. He had a small cabin tucked deep in the pines, neat, sturdy, and isolated. The kind of place that felt like it was built to hold secrets. It was finally a safe enough spot for me to visit and stay. That summer, Dad was my absolute hero. We spent days hiking, fishing, and exploring the trails. I'd follow him everywhere, asking about wildlife, survival tricks, and of course, the local legends. I was obsessed with the stories about Bigfoot, or as some locals called it, the Redwood Howler. Dad always rolled his eyes whenever I brought it up, saying, "You'd be better off learning about real animals." But sometimes, if I pushed him hard enough, he'd tell me one of the old stories anyway. To me, Bigfoot was the ultimate mystery, half myth, half possibility. I'd listen to every rumor like gospel, convinced that one day I'd be the one to see it for real. One evening, the phone in the cabin rang just as the sun was setting. Dad answered, his face tightening as he listened. A search and rescue call had come in. A hiker was missing somewhere deep in the valley. They needed all rangers to report immediately. He argued for a while, saying he couldn't just leave his kid alone, especially with movie night planned. But duty won. He knelt down, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Sometimes people's lives depend on me being out there. You'll be safe here. I'll be back before midnight." I wasn't scared. In fact, I felt proud. My dad, the hero ranger, going out to save someone. I told him I'd stay up playing video games and beat his high score on Wii Sports Resort while he was gone. He laughed, ruffled my hair, and drove off in his Jeep, taillights vanishing into the trees. That night, I played until my thumbs ached, a mix of sports games and Zelda. The forest outside the window faded from dusk to pitch black. I remember thinking about that lost hiker and hoping Dad found them safe. Then I heard it. A faint creak on the porch, slow, deliberate. I froze. I thought maybe Dad had come back early, but the sound didn't fit. It wasn't the quick shuffle of boots. It was heavier, slower. Then came a metallic rattle. Someone was trying the doorknob. My stomach dropped. Dad had a key. Whoever was out there wasn't him. The cabin was small and open plan, so I could see the door from where I stood. The rattling stopped as soon as I stepped closer, like whoever it was could somehow sense me. I held my breath, my eyes locked on the handle. Then I smelled it. That stench, thick, musky, wet. It was like standing next to a drenched dog that had rolled in dirt. It was exactly how my dad once described Bigfoot, the scent he said hunters could recognize miles away. My heart pounded. Could it really be? I didn't dare open the door. I just stood there, breathing that awful smell. As something or someone tapped the wood softly. 1, 2, 3. Taps. It almost sounded like a signal. I was still staring when another sound cut through the silence. A sharp crack of wood splintering. From the back of the cabin, I spun around, terrified. The noise came again. Someone was prying at the rear window with something metal. I crept down the narrow hallway until I could peek around the corner, and there it was. A figure, human-sized, bent over the window, using what looked like a crowbar to wedge the frame open. The wood was cracked, and a hand, definitely human, slipped through the gap, trying to lift the latch. I gasped. The intruder froze, then redoubled their effort to get in. Panic took over. I shouted, "Help!" without thinking. What answered wasn't a human voice. It was a roar, a deep, guttural sound from outside. On the other side of the cabin. Heavy footsteps thundered through the ground. The man at the window went still for half a second, then disappeared into the darkness. I ran to the window in time to see movement, shadows shifting in the moonlight. Then a second shadow streaked past the glass, larger, faster, and heavier than anything I'd ever seen. I slammed the window shut and managed to relock it despite the splintered frame. The footsteps faded into the woods. My legs gave out. I turned off every light, grabbed a pillow, and crawled under the kitchen table. I don't know how long I stayed there, shaking and listening to the silence outside. Eventually, exhaustion won, but sometime later, I woke up. That smell was back, that same wet, musky, dog-like stench, drifting in from the front door. I was half asleep, half aware, and weirdly enough, I didn't feel afraid. The smell almost felt comforting, like whoever or whatever it was had scared away the real danger. I drifted back into uneasy sleep. When I finally woke again, it was morning. Light was spilling through the windows, and the sound of keys jingled at the door. Dad stepped in, muddy and tired, but smiling when he saw me crawl out from under the table. He was holding something in his hand, a rock and a feather, placed one on top of the other. He said he'd found it right on the doorstep. "Wasn't here last night," he said. We sat at the table while I told him everything. The sounds, the intruder, the roar, the smell. He didn't laugh or dismiss it. He just listened, nodding slowly, then looked again at the rock and feather. Later that day, he told me what had happened while he was gone. Turns out, the rescue call had been a violent fight between two hikers. One had pushed the other down a cliff and fled into the woods. The rangers had spent all night searching for both men. Dad was convinced the one who escaped had tried to break into our cabin, thinking it was empty. It made sense. The cabin had a ranger's insignia on the door. He probably assumed the place was unoccupied while the search was happening. But who, or what, had scared him off that night? Dad and I never came up with a certain answer. But the smell, the roar, the massive shadow, and that strange offering, they stayed burned into my mind. Maybe it was just an animal. Maybe not. But whatever it was, it had my back that night. Even Dad started to believe after that. we never had another encounter that close, though sometimes he'd find strange tracks or hear knocking in the distance. But that one night in Redwood Valley proved enough for both of us. Whether you believe or not, I'll leave that to you. But I know what I saw and what I smelled. And sometimes, when I catch that faint, wet, musky scent in the woods, I still whisper, "Thanks, buddy. You saved me once." When I was a kid, I grew up in the foster system, so a lot of my childhood memories involve being home alone. Most of those memories are hazy, quiet nights, empty rooms, and the feeling that I was somewhere temporary. But there's one night that stands out sharply, the kind that never fades. It terrified me back then, but strangely, it also ended up changing my life for the better, though at the time, I didn't think I'd survive it. Before I tell it, I just want to say this. If anyone out there is considering becoming a foster parent, please do it for the right reasons. There are too many kids in the system whose stories don't end like mine did. When this happened, I had been living with the Millers for about 3 weeks. I just come from another stay in a group care home, and at first, I was hopeful, a real family again. Maybe this time for good. But it didn't take long to realize the truth. The Millers didn't actually care about me. I was just another paycheck from the state. They weren't cruel, though, at least not in the way some foster parents could be. They didn't yell or hit. They just didn't care. They were the kind of people who saw me more as a box tick than a child to love. Honestly, I would have preferred that indifference over abuse any day. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. They treated me politely, even kindly, when they remembered I existed. They'd let me raid the kitchen for snacks, watch TV, or read quietly in my room. I was a shy, withdrawn 6-year-old who barely spoke above a whisper. I liked to hide under my bed with a flashlight and a book. In short, I was exactly the kind of child the Millers wanted: quiet, undemanding, invisible. They wanted someone who wouldn't cause trouble while they were out doing whatever they pleased. And that was me. I never disobeyed, never argued, never asked for more than what was given. So within days, they were comfortable enough to leave me home alone at night. At first, I didn't mind. I'd grown used to fending for myself. And in my 6-year-old brain, being left alone in that little 2-story house felt like freedom. No adults to tell me no, and an entire kitchen full of snacks waiting for me. Sometimes I wonder how long I would have stayed with them if nothing had ever happened. If that night hadn't changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening. The Millers had gone out again, and I was curled up on the couch watching cartoons. The neighborhood, Willow Creek, was quiet, not a fancy suburb, but better than most of the places I'd lived before. The paint on the houses was chipped, the lawns patchy, but it felt safe enough. That was why I didn't think much of it when I heard the knock. It startled me at first. No one ever came by. But I remembered what Mr. Miller always said before they left: don't break anything. Don't answer the door. Brush your teeth before bed. He'd repeat it like a checklist, every single time. There had never been a knock before. I had no plan for what to do. I wasn't going to open it. I knew better, but curiosity got the best of me. I crept into the hallway, careful to step on the quiet parts of the floor. From there, I could listen without being seen. The person outside must have heard the faint creak of the floorboards, because he spoke. His voice was calm, soft, even friendly. "Hey there," he said. "I'm from Child Services. I just need to check in with you and make sure you're okay." My heart thudded. I knew exactly what that meant. If Child Services found out the Millers were leaving me alone, they'd get in trouble and I'd be taken away again. I didn't want that. As miserable as I sometimes felt there, I liked having a bed that was mine, a room with my books, and no one shouting at me. So I didn't answer. The man kept talking through the door. "I know you're in there," he said gently. "You can open the door. I just need to make sure everything's fine." I hugged my knees and stayed quiet. Then his tone changed, still calm, but more insistent. Your foster parents told me to stop by. I left something here last time, a wallet. They said it's fine if I come in. That made my stomach twist. He used their names, their full names. For a second, I doubted myself. Maybe he really did know them. I finally whispered through the door, "Who are you?" He hesitated, then said, "I'm a friend of the Millers. They wanted me to check that you're okay. They said you'd let me in." That's when I knew something wasn't right. He'd said he was from Child Services. Now he was saying he was a friend. I might have been 6, but even I could see through that. I swallowed hard and said quietly, "I'm not allowed to open the door for strangers." He laughed lightly. "That's good," he said. "That's very smart of you. They told me you were a good kid. But it's okay, the test's over now. You can open up." Then he said, "I just need to grab my wallet. I'll be gone in a second." I shook my head. "I'm sorry," I said. "I can't." Something in my voice must have pushed him over the edge. The next sound was an explosion of anger. He slammed his fist against the door, so hard the echo shook the hallway. I screamed and backed away as he pounded again, shouting vile words I didn't even understand at the time. The kind of words no adult should ever say to a child. "Stupid brat." He roared, "Open this door, you little." I ran out. My instincts took over. I bolted up the stairs and hid in my closet, wedged between hanging clothes and boxes of old toys. From there I could still hear him, the pounding, the shouting, the scraping of metal against the lock. He was trying to break in. Remember shaking so hard, I thought the clothes hangers would rattle. Time slowed to nothing. He screamed, cursed, threatened, for what felt like forever. Then, finally, there was another sound, voices. A man and a woman shouting from outside. The Millers. Then came the thud of something heavy, wood hitting wood, or something being smashed. More shouting. Then, silence. I didn't move. Not until I heard the front door slam shut and Mrs. Miller's voice calling my name. "Clara? Where are you?" I didn't answer. I stayed in the closet, crying quietly. She called again, this time sounding more annoyed than worried. A few minutes later, Mr. Miller opened the closet door. His face was flushed, his voice clipped. "Come out," he said flatly. "It's over." I didn't dare ask questions, and he didn't offer any answers. He just told me to go to bed. The next morning, Mr. Miller was gone. Mrs. Miller made me breakfast like nothing had happened. She didn't say a word about the man or the night before. I didn't either. Around mid-morning, there was another knock at the door. This time, it really was Child Services. My caseworker stood there with a tired smile and a clipboard. She said she was there to take me back to the group home. No reason was given. Mrs. Miller barely looked at me as she said goodbye. Just a quiet "good luck, sweetheart," before shutting the door behind me. I didn't have the courage to ask why. I just sat in the car, watching the house disappear as we drove away. But halfway back, I mumbled something about the man who came to the house last night. My caseworker's smile faded. She glanced at me in the mirror and said softly, "I know, honey." Then she reached back and ruffled my hair. That was all she ever said. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he wanted from me. I never saw the Millers again. Years later, I tried to look them up online, just out of curiosity, but there was nothing. No records, no trace. I stayed in the group home for a few more months, before being placed with another family, one that eventually adopted me. They became my real family, the only one that ever truly wanted me. I was lucky. Most foster kids don't get that ending. Some meet people like the man at the door and never get the chance to escape. Even now, all these years later, a part of me still wonders who he was. But the bigger part of me doesn't want to know. Because deep down, I think I already do. If you enjoy stories like this, then don't forget to subscribe to The Unholy Script. Your one click helps us keep uncovering more stories.